Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindy Baldy, and this is my husband and co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening. All right, gang. We're delighted here on Management Muse for an episode on strong families with our good friend and mentor, Larry Allman. What you need to know about this man is he's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. He's been doing family therapy for over 50 years, and we both think, and we don't throw this word around a lot, the man is a genius.
Yeah.
And you're about to learn why. Background, PhD, been doing family therapy forever, originally from the East Coast of the United States.
Boston.
Yeah, has his training really in kind of gritty, hardcore work. Got his training, eventually made his way to Maui and then Honolulu, where he's lived for 40 years now. Yeah. And we had to bring his voice to you here on the podcast because he's the best person that we know in the world about helping families when they're off track get on track and helping strong families become exceptional.
And that translates into business because everybody has family. Managers have families that they have to deal with, and employees have families that they're dealing with. And so it actually crosses over into management and business.
Right.
And
yeah.
If you get a family business, then there's a whole bucket of stuff that you can get into.
Yeah. Anybody who believes that your family life doesn't impact your work performance hasn't ever been at work. Because come on. It used to be back in the day, Cindy and I are just barely old enough to remember kind of that old school of, well, you can compartmentalize, but the studies are resoundingly clear that people can't, that trouble at home bleeds into work. That's why managers care.
I'm pretty sure that troubles at work also bleed over into home.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they study it. People actually make careers studying both sides of that. And so they study the family stuff that bleeds into work, and then a smaller group of scholars study the work into home. I forget what they call it. They call it like work to home, home to work, or something like that. It's got a different twist. And so let's hear from the man himself, Larry Allman. Why should our audience, managers, in your opinion, care about strong families?
Let me add a little piece about what family systems theory is.
Okay.
I got into this in the early parts of my training when there was only one therapy, psychoanalysis, individual. And then we started working with low-income families. And then we started working with minorities, that you couldn't get someone to come to the office and lie down on the couch 5 days a week.
I just wouldn't do it.
It wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so family therapy, when it began, really in the 60s, was called anti-psychiatry psychiatry.
Did you come up with that name?
Oh, no. What it was considered all over. And
wow.
Because remember, there was only one therapy, psychoanalysis.
Right. Freud.
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea of sitting with a whole family and doing home visits, which we were doing, was unheard of.
Wow.
So we were the first to go out into the streets to see families at their homes, to see them in the neighborhoods, to get familiar with their neighborhoods. And I did my postdoc in public community mental health.
Wow.
Which is why we came originally to Hawaii. I came with my mentor because there's more multi-generational families here in Hawaii than anywhere in America. So we thought we could maybe create a mental health system that addressed multi-family issues.
Yeah.
And do it the first thing my mentor did when we came to Hawaii was to close the inpatient hospital, to close the clinics, because he said local Hawaiians they're not going to come to Maui Memorial Hospital 40 miles away from Hana.
Right.
And go to get care. We have to go out there.
Yeah.
So we had mobile teams.
Wow. And you'd actually go into their home?
Absolutely. And we were doing it in New York and we were doing it in Boston before.
Wow.
So when I came to New York from Boston, I said, well, when he told me I want to go to Maui in 1971, I said, where's that, Africa?
Wow.
I said, well, I came to New York because New York psychologically is a long way from Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I was
sure
from.
is.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I came to New York to work with you, so I'll go to Maui with you.
Wow.
So I went with he and his family, who were living in Greenwich, Connecticut at the time.
Wow. To Maui.
To Maui to live up at Kula Sanitarium, which was the old TB hospital, which they gave us doctors' houses on the sanitarium.
Wow. In what year was this?
1971 and 72.
Wow. That must have been an incredible experience.
It is. Every time I go back to Maui, I go up to the Kula San and just sit there on the wall there and think about what a shift it was from New York
Oh my gosh.
to Kula San. And remember, there was not much built in
Maui at that point. It's still fairly country.
But certainly all the fancy hotels weren't there on the Wailea coast, and they were right below us at that time.
Yeah.
So it's always been a very alternative posture. We don't believe that the individual really lives separately from the family. And it really began when we began working with some of my mentors. I was one of the kids at that time. There were about
the young buck.
Yeah, a half a dozen of us who were like under. Our mentors were all former analysts who had been kicked out of psychoanalysis
for doing unorthodox methods.
Things. The idea of sitting with a husband and wife together was seen as heresy in the analytic world.
Wow.
If you saw the husband, someone else would have to see the wife.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like almost a lawyer type relationship.
Confidential.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say, still to this day in many circles of therapy, that's still practiced.
Yeah.
But we were going into whole systems and trying to create systems.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a real revolution, in the mental health field. And coming to Hawaii with this more intergenerational families, and why I have stayed here for many years, although I spent 10 years teaching at UCLA and USC.
Yeah, Larry's one of the few people who was actually jointly appointed to the faculty of the psychiatry and the psychology department, where they don't always get along.
Yeah. I was psychiatry at UCLA and psychology and sociology at USC.
Oh, wow.
So in any case, going back to, working with families, our view in family systems is that we are all members of our families.
We are all members
of our families. We are all connected to our families. We are part of a tribe.
Okay.
You see it beautifully here in the Pacific Islanders. If you hire a Tongan family to do, when I had my farm in Maui, I'd hire the Tongans to do the trees. And they come up, but everyone in the family came along and they stayed on the grounds for the weekend while the guys went up the trees.
Wow.
Because they live in tribal context. Samoans, and they really are closer interconnected than we in the Western cultures are.
And so what's the impact as our society atomizes in some ways and becomes more individualistic?
I think it's one of the real problems. For example, every year I see couples who come to Hawaii who want to live here, and they come here and they don't have any family connection here, and they have kids, and they implode on each other.
Wow. Yeah.
And part of my intervention is I get them to leave.
What? You say that's it? You don't have deep enough roots here?
I have a family I still talk to who came here and they got PhD and good jobs, everything, and 2 kids. They were just imploding on each other. They had no resources here.
Yeah.
And they were from Louisiana.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that's a pretty tight group over there.
I sent them back to Louisiana. They lived right next door to the mother.
Yeah. How much, if any, of a family-like atmosphere can be recreated at work, and is that for the good?
I would say at a level where it's not like a family business.
Yeah.
A manager really probably needs to create, and I mentioned to you when we did the program in Texas, they should have community centers. And for the families to come. They should make it not only hiring the individual, but provide something for the family.
Yeah.
They feel nurtured by the institution.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting because in a few places that we know of do that intentionally, but we constantly hear stories about people, they get brought out for a job interview and the company says, bring your family and we want to show them the town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they arrange, the whole thing is arranged for, the wife is the one applying for the job, but the husband and the 2 kids, they spend the day with the real estate agent and they go all around and here's the schools and here's the...
That's smart.
Yeah.
That's
Because
smart.
you're getting, in best case, you're getting what you actually need for this to work over the long haul, which is the person
family
doing the
be
job
okay with
buy
it.
in
Yeah.
and the system, the tribe buy in.
And they feel this place cares for them.
Yeah.
Not just the worker.
Yeah.
Cares for them. And you're certainly in the level of what you're dealing with as a manager, they're employees.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
An employee, for the most part, doesn't own his company. He's not the CEO. So his family is essentially what his life is about.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for commercial break. One of the ways that our surveys are very helpful is that they help organizations solidify, they help the leadership solidify what they think they know.
Yeah.
But may not be certain.
Yeah.
Because you sometimes...
Hunches.
Yeah, it's hunches. Because, you get... The thing with leadership is as you become more disconnected, you start to learn more in a leadership role about the things that are impacting the organization as a whole, but you start to lose sight of what's happening and impacting your employees. So there's like this disconnect between those 2 levels. And so they'll have these hunches about what's going on, and our surveys are pretty comprehensive. I'm able to adapt them based on the concerns of the leadership team to be able to measure things that they are interested in measuring. And so then when we bring it to them, they go through the results. We run them through a 3-hour session going through what the results actually say and facilitate their conversations about it. A lot of the time, they either get their hunch solved or realize maybe I've got like sort of this echo chamber of people who are negative on an issue, but it doesn't actually exist here. And so we see both things happen. And I think not only is the information useful for leadership in terms of thinking about how to move forward, but the facilitation and just having the opportunity and having conversations that maybe have been difficult to talk about open with a third-party facilitator seems to help organizations move along on a helpful path, a constructive path.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those surveys, they're custom. So we're measuring what you need to measure in your company. Is it a communication problem? Or is it a culture problem? Or is it a burnout problem? Or is it a turnover problem? And so we give you the right tool to measure what you're worried about. And then the results.
And I'm the one who comes up with the actual items. You tell me the problem, I translate that into measurement.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not off the shelf. Some of the things that we do a lot, we've done before, and that's the start point. But it's custom to what your problems are. And then it's going to tell you this actually is a problem or it's not. My hunch is right here or my hunch is wrong. And then that allows you to take more targeted, precise action.
Right.
It makes for a lot more efficiency. Yep. Culsure.com. CULSURE. CULSURE.com for the survey. When you think about families at work, it gets into this idea that you were just talking about a moment ago, family business. And so what happens when these things that we try to keep separate sometimes, even though they're not, families and business, actually collide in a family business?
Now, I've seen a lot of family-owned businesses over the years. I think of one here. One of the families I saw a long time ago came in to see me, and the father, at that point in time, when I asked him what about his history, he said, well, my family came here on a plantation. He was Japanese, and that's how the Japanese came here. This is a plantation place, Hawaii. And my father had skills, and he became he fixed the houses for the people in the plantation. And he got the hardware to fix the houses in the plantation.
Yeah.
Well, the father took it to the next level and owns all the Ace Hardware stores around the military bases.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And then got into fixing and remodeling all the internal offices at Tripler, at the Army Hospital.
Yeah.
Like when my office, when at Tripler, that was all, it was, modeled by this family. They even had a trailer on the property at Tripler.
Wow.
They didn't do the big, build a building, but they fixed all the internal offices.
Yeah.
So he had this big business and had 3 kids, 1 daughter and 2 sons. One son, the daughter, given that she was a girl, went to college, ended up being a lawyer, and it's very smart in the government service nowadays that a woman be the head of a company. It's a strategy almost. So she became the president of the company.
Wow.
But she was not the other brother was a construction worker.
Huh.
And the third one was a truck driver.
Huh.
They were all paid the same.
Really?
Right. They were all paid the same. And therefore, they were bickering all the time.
Right. I can imagine.
My job is harder.
I'm doing more for the company.
The woman was
beside herself.
I mean, she went to college. She was an attorney.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to get paid the same as a truck driver when you're an attorney.
Or even the brother who's a construction worker. He would come in the office in his boots, and he was on doing the jobs and the construction thing. Was not smart about the business stuff. That was not a very dysfunctional. That was pretty dysfunctional for the business. Their only way of dealing was to divide it up.
What's something that in your years of doing this work of helping to strengthen families that's surprised you or continues to surprise you?
I'll tell you, one, there's no such thing as normal.
Yeah.
Everybody's struggling with family issues.
Okay.
Everybody.
Yeah. And what are some of the common things? They're like, I don't like this person that's my sibling, and
that I don't like, things about my, I was just sitting with a woman and her son, her, 13-year-old son is in it because the mother always lectures you should watch all these video games, don't watch the shooting games, don't watch this and this. I said, did your mother lecture you? Oh yeah, all the time.
And did you like that?
Yeah. Did you like it? No. Get out of the way.
Yeah.
You're not going to change someone at this point in life.
Yeah.
By doing just what your mother did to you.
Yeah. And so how do people overcome if the family's so strong that we don't fall too far from the tree, but every family struggles and every family, there's no such thing as a normal family. How do we thrive anyway?
I'm worried about that. Being at my age now and seeing what's happened in psychiatry, and I've been a psychiatry professor even here in Hawaii. Psychiatry now, they're into this thing called spectrum diagnosis, which means every one of us, you, me, all of us have a psychiatric diagnosis now. You have to.
Do you find that where people work can play a supportive role in them having a good grounding in resilience and in the ability to bounce back from setbacks?
Resilience, and remember, I talked to it in that program, my colleague, former Walsh in Northwestern, has spent her career looking at resilience. It's similarly Jim Gordon, who's also part of that world, has been in Washington. He goes to Kosovo, and he goes to, he's in Ukraine, and, and what they all do is very much what we're talking about. Find people's connections. Get them to be part of something. You don't have to like everyone in your family.
Let's say that I'm an old school manager and I'm listening to this and I'm like, this is crazy. I can't do this. People should just come to work. They should just come to work.
I don't want to get in their problems. I don't want to deal with the emotions.
And how would you help somebody like that try to make progress?
Well, I think they need to be a bit educated.
Okay.
For example, I remember when I was in Boston and Cambridge, one of my friends was getting his doctorate at Harvard Business School. He was taking all the same courses I was. I would say, Gil, you're in business school. Why are you taking all the psych courses? So that's what they make me take.
Yeah, we had a lot of both of us in our different degrees had a lot of psychology classes.
Yeah.
And that's what they need to do. You can't just think this is a robot coming to work with you and just going to do the task.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. There's been, it seems, in the last 5 to 7 years, more emphasis on social causes at work and organizations taking a stand.
Trying to basically get at the individual and what's important and significant to them.
Right. But there hasn't been a corresponding family emphasis. Like, we should, in other words, if I was to simplify some of this conversation that we've been having, or not simplify it, but exaggerate it and simplify it, I would say, don't worry about saving the planet. Worry about this person you work with, what's going on in their family? Where do they come from? And if you focus on that, you'll have a much better understanding for this person you're spending 8 to 9 hours a day with.
I would say why my friend Dennis Jaffrey travels all around the world with that. Healthy family businesses, for example, why these ones he studied, 100-year wealth.
Yeah.
That's how they work.
When you think about our audience of managers, if you wanted to make sure that one thing they remembered about strong families, what would that be?
Well, strong, let's say one, I'd say everyone who comes in as an employee is part of a family. And if you don't revere that as a manager, if you don't in your intake interview get some sense of that, like if they have, dismissed their parent, they can dismiss you as the boss.
Yeah.
The healthy family would be one who doesn't necessarily like everything like I, but has respect for that person. Like I'm telling this mother today, that who's still trying to parent because the dad doesn't do anything. So she micromanages.
Right. Overcorrects.
Right.
Yeah. And I said to her, "You're fired. You're fired from that role. These kids are good enough.
Yeah.
They're good enough." One of the things, there's a lot of parents who are very good in the first formative years. I mean, both of you had good enough parents to form it. You wouldn't be, either of you be who you are if you didn't have that.
Yeah.
But many parents are not good in the next developmental years.
It kind of reminds me of contingency theory for leadership. Like you have people who have a certain style of leadership and they will excel in certain situations or early on in an organization, so it could be like an organization that's people who excel when it's in crisis, people who excel when it's in stability, people who excels with followers who are brand new to something, like an emerging organization. But as an organization transitions, because the environment's always changing, that leadership style doesn't work. And they're so stuck on being this type of leader that they don't make the transition to be this other type of leader, even though there's really no reason that they couldn't make that transition. And that's what it sounds like to me when you're talking about a parent, because that's leadership. It's a leadership of a small group.
You can't be the control. You need to be the controlling mother in the first years of a child's life.
Right, because they can't do anything.
They can't. They don't have developmental, autonomy. They don't. That's why our argument about therapy for children. Children don't develop what they call formal operational thinking till they're well in the teens almost, which means they can't abstract themselves from themselves.
Yeah.
They're living in what they call concrete operations.
Yeah.
They are.
Right.
There's no way that they're going to listen to someone who's telling them, it's just not going to happen. Yes, they can have some emotional corrective experiences in a play therapy, and I like play therapy, but that should be in addition to something. Like one of the books I did bring, one of my closest mentors, he just died 2 years ago at 95 or so.
Wow.
Did he die in the chair?
Not quite. Almost. He was working into his 90s.
That's awesome.
And at that point, he was working for McKinsey.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And he wrote this book.
Reading the Room. Group Dynamics for Coaches and Leaders. Sounds actually very good. David Cantor. Oh, I know that name too. Okay.
Take a look at it. You can,
Yeah, let me look at it.
Yeah.
And we'll put a link in the podcast as well.
For sure.
But David...
And to Dennis Jaffe's book on
And David would say, if he were alive, what in this conversation, he says he brought that into the world of McKinsey.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
We made a list the other day. What was it? 71 different topics.
I think it was about that, yeah.
So it makes sense. We kind of got our sea legs doing this in universities where you teach a lot of different topics a lot of times. Basically, they're broadly in two categories: improving performance and improving communication, which are, of course, interrelated. But we do a lot of our work on helping remove obstacles to communication, resolving conflict, negotiating, bargaining, persuading, a lot of communication-heavy topics, and then a lot of performance topics. And so peak performance, motivation, happiness, resilience, stress management, time management, all those things I would kind of put under that.
Right.
Performance
it's
category.
everything you consider when you're thinking about performance.
And so the classes are fun, they're timely, they're based on science, and they give people what they need quickly. A couple tools can be half day or full day sessions. A couple tools, it moved quick. Get people in, give them a few things they can wrap their teeth around and move out. Classes from ondemandleadership.com. ondemandleadership.com. You will love our instructors. Promise you that. Make you think, make you laugh, give you a few things to take away. I met Larry when I basically bit off too much change at one time. I'd ended a relationship. I'd blown up a friendship in the course of doing that.
But you were a West Point Army Ranger.
Yeah. All these things. And I thought I was going crazy because of all this change, and I was leaving the Army. And so my friend who Larry's talking about, named Bob Forston, was a psychiatrist. And I said, look, I think I'm going crazy. I need to talk to somebody to make sure if I'm crazy or not, what I do. And he said, there's only one person that you should ever talk to, and that's Larry Allman. And here's his number. And that's how I met Larry. And go back to, one of Larry's things is that everybody's a little crazy. And so it was so refreshing as a 20-year-old who was worried that I was going crazy.
And yet here you were doing everything that was a superstar in the military. West Point, Army Ranger, all of that. You should be, dying and going to heaven.
Yeah. Yep. I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah. And yet it didn't work for your emotional life.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were kind enough, and it's not just kindness, it's the way you lived your life, but you basically, and I remember at 20, it's like, no, you're not crazy. This is normal. And you're figuring out what comes next, and you gotta work your way through this, and you can't take a shortcut. And it was exactly what I needed to hear.
And I think also, you obviously can speak for yourself, but like listening to it, I think you have tremendous credibility because you'll also hang up on him when you think he's being stupid.
Yeah.
And so when you say, good things and you're normal and, you're not out of the lines.
I don't listen to much people bullshit.
I know you don't, but that gives you credibility when you actually say, hey, you know what? You're not crazy.
I think one of the worst things about people in my profession, they tolerate too much bullshit.
And you don't.
And I don't. And I was fortunate. If I think a big part of my success, and I'm doing something about writing about this, because there's a famous study, the Grant study at Harvard.
Yeah.
And, one of the major findings is mentors. I've had 4 major mentors in my life.
Yeah, you've had some really high roller mentors.
Really.
Yeah.
And I never applied for a job. I got tenure at UCLA in psychiatry with Milton Greenberg, who'd been chair at Harvard.
Wow.
I came out here with Dick Auerswald, who had been, he was at Columbia, and I went to work from Boston to work with him. He was the foremost person in public mental health in the country. And took his little job in Maui.
Yeah.
Dave Cantor these were people who I loved.
Yeah.
And the Grant studies, shows that what is one of the major findings differentiates those people who graduate Harvard.
Yeah.
They were looking at who are the ones who are really successful versus the ones who just
mentorship.
It's the one who had mentors.
Yep. Wow. Yeah, I've seen that before. I'm not sure if it was the Harvard study or not, but I've seen that in other research as well. There's some of the network analysis actually that gets done in organizations. The people who actually rise, even outside of the organization, like crossing organizations, people who sort of excel in their career path, it's tied to actually having mentors along the way.
I view my success is I've had 4 major ones and several others along the way too. I've always really respect someone who knows something that I want to learn about, and I've had good relationships with these people. I was in their homes.
Yeah.
That they were intimate people in my lives.
What's a piece of wisdom you'd like to leave our audience with?
That if they can't work it out with the family, they're probably having some problems working it out with people in the workplace. Okay. If they've cut off from family members, they're going to meet someone who's like a family member in the workplace and have a problem with them. They can't learn the tolerance for different ways of being in the world. I've seen this in situations where I have a fellow now. He's a very hard worker. He went to Boston College and very, driven kind of a guy. And he works. His employees tell him he should take a vacation because he never takes a vacation. So he's very intolerant to people who have a life.
Yes, I see that. I see that with some people as well.
They think everyone should work like they do.
Yeah. Right. And they violate boundaries because of
it. Absolutely. And they're destructive to people, don't like working for them. Mm-hmm. They create a very hostile working environment. They're machines. Mm-hmm. They can get away with it in a workplace, but boy, they come home. Those kind of guys have horrible family lives.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I've seen them.
They're driving
offices.
them. Yeah.
So sometimes what we think is success in this country,
very interesting,
is not necessarily success in life.
Yeah.
And then they pass it on to people in the workplace.
Yeah.
This is what Dave Cantor. Why did he end up at McKinsey? Oh.
Yeah. Because it was getting passed from home to work.
Yeah. And getting people to be more, I want to say more compassionate.
Yeah.
A compassionate work environment is often a very good one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my 3 takeaways from Larry's discussion today, which I loved, is 1, nobody's normal, and we need to get comfortable with that. 2, we don't have to like everybody at home
or at work. We just have to
be able to work together.
Right.
Yeah. And 3, we crave connection in both places.
And I would say with the family, add a piece to it. Yeah, the manager.
Okay.
I would say to the manager who's having a problem with an employee, look inside yourself Why are you having such a strong reaction to that person?
Yeah, very interesting.
One of the early definitions, more even of psychoanalysis, is the analysis of resistance. The analysis of, like, if I have a strong reaction to someone, it's not indifferent. It's probably something in me that's creating my reaction to that employee.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like my mother or the mother I don't like, or something like that. If he's a manager, he's got to be, as you know, in the higher end business programs, you take psychology courses.
Yeah,
Why?
sure.
Right. It's all about people.
With McKinsey.
Right. It's all about management. Is all about people. And like you have Daniel Coleman's over here. You know, Coleman. Sorry. And you know, like part of emotional intelligence.
All right, but
is
he's part of my world.
Right. But as part of that emotional intelligence is you have to be able to get yourself together. And part of that is, you know, being in a good place with like your larger system of support.
Yeah. And Danny Goleman, he's like this fellow Jim Gordon, who's a psychiatrist, probably the most visible international American psychiatrist, based in Washington, D.C. He's all over the planet.
Yeah.
Doing this kind of...
Yeah.
He'll go to, you know, I'm sure he's in Ukraine, he's been in Kosovo, he's been all over the place.
Yeah.
And what he does is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Did you get your 3 out?
I got my 3. I'm going to give Larry the last words.
Okay.
And then we'll say that we've done enough. Larry, last words, any final thoughts for our audience?
Well, I would say we're all part of families. And that people have to, the goal in life is somehow to see how the apples don't fall far from the tree. That when I was thinking about this talk today, I was thinking about our stories in our brain. And you got to know your story.
Thanks again for joining us on the Management Muse. We appreciate likes, stars, downloads, shares, and subscriptions. For more information on the resources that help us generate this content, check out the reference material in our show notes. Special thanks to Rebecca Henley, Abby Ariano, and Ariel Villafane. Thank you. See you next time.